Good afternoon, gamers. Jero here, back with more VOD reviews, the usual. Got a fun one today. So, as I've mentioned on the channel previously, not for any particular reason, but we haven't actually had a lot of chance to cover a lot of Yi content. Considering it being like one of the more popular decks that people are playing, it just doesn't seem like it's come up in a lot of the matches for people that I've been trying to do reviews on. So we finally have one today. This is a ramp list, no auroras. I'm pretty sure. As usual, I didn't watch the entire video. I just kind of scanned through it, but I'm pretty sure that there is no aurora in this list, and we have Dr. Rick Marsh in the house today. And his opponent in this video is Closing Time, who, if that name means anything to you, they, spoiler alert, go on to win this tournament, the Runes and Rift challenge that this is from over the weekend. So, bit of a, precursor to what may happen, but I still think, the gameplay is very valuable, and it's from an archetype that we want to cover, right? You need to know, I've said this plenty in the past, it's very important to know how every deck functions, even if it's not the deck you're planning to play. Understanding how a deck functions and what the other person is trying to do or set up is integral in being the opponent and trying to set up your plans to defend that if you can easier understand what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish in the game. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into these games here. Looks like we're going to mulligan Primal Might and Discipline. I think that particularly makes sense when we don't have any units to defend, and then still no units here. Notably, we are on Candlelit Sanctum versus Voidgate. And let's see who is going to be on the play. Looks like it will be Closing Time, and we start with a student. No unit, just going to be an easy find your center angle. And that'll do it for us. Closing Time gets their first victory points. Going Candlelit Sanctum. Gonna get a little look at the top two action. Figure out how they want to set up their next draw. We're probably... our play next turn is pretty set up, of course. We're probably looking to just set up Azonius plus Poro. There's a chance maybe we're just wanting to hold the Zonias for an Hourglass since we don't really want to protect the Poro. I don't think protecting the Poro is like a great strategy. And they've got the tempo draw, Poro into Hopeful. So yeah, we are very far behind. That was a good draw. That was definitely a good draw. I think we're pretty reliant on that. And then are we going to play as an Hourglass, or are we going to wait to be able to hide it? I think this makes sense. There's something to be said about the mana efficiency of it if we don't have a unit we're protecting. But we might just be trying to set up Master Yi next turn because we'll have 8 resources. So we can play Master Yi plus Hourglass Hide, which has got to be the right play. That's got to be our most powerful play next turn, assuming we can set that up. Drawing that Pit Rookie was a really big deal. We would have been very, very far behind on board without it. We've got a Falling Star going for both of our units. We have the counter, thankfully. Would have been tough business without it. Really, really important that we had the spirit there. All right. On guard, pretty good draw. I don't really see any reason for us to do anything other than Master Yi, unless we're wanting to save our resources for some reason, but I guess we're worried about the sequencing on how we should attack. We're going Candlelit Sanctum to look at our top cards, which I think for sure makes sense because the Yi just trounces the Poro in combat. I would be a little hesitant. Oh, we're just hourglassing. Interesting. Very interesting. I guess. I'm not sure how I feel about this play. I'm going to set up the pause there just to kind of talk through what I would be thinking. So we don't have a lot of defense set up. It looks like Marsh's plan is just sit on our tricks, right? We're just going to sit on our Primal Might plus on guard. I guess it's not immediately obvious to me that that's better than just spending our turn, tapping out for Master Yi, conquering Void Gate, and hiding Hourglass on Void Gate. Because at least then we get our best value out of the Hourglass, right? Because we're protecting the Yi. Our opponent's going to be very incentivized to use a spell there, maybe, because we're on Void Gate, so they would get extra damage out of their spell. And then presumably we could double conquer Candlelit Sanctum. But then I could see that there's danger in that as well, because like something like a Darius would just completely trump us, right? We would just lose both of our units for nothing. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. I guess it does make sense. It also gives us the chance to stockpile a few extra resources so that next turn we can play Yi plus potentially defend it. So we just have to make sure that we're probably obliged to play Primal Wrath first, because I think it's more important to hold on to the on guard. So I think this play makes sense. I would have still been very incentivized and interested in the Yi line, but I at least understand what Marsh is thinking. He's probably thinking that it's too likely that we would be down on resources, and even though we would keep the Yi because of the Hourglass, we would almost certainly lose Candlelit Sanctum. But if you were worried about that, maybe you could just put one unit over there. But then one unit just dies to the Hopeful without even them having to commit a resource to it. At least if you had the Poro and the Rookie over there, they probably have to commit a spell to conquering Candlelit Sanctum. I'm not sure. Very interesting line. Ooh, Singularity. Singularity. That's tough. That's tough. Well, it's not immediately obvious that Primal Might is even a good play here. But like I said before, we're kind of obliged to use it, I feel like. Otherwise, we're so behind on tempo. I think this makes sense. It just feels really bad. The problem is, and the reason Marsh did this is because if you do Might something like the Poro to keep it alive and force a trade, then you're just using your Hourglass on another like pretty small weak unit. That Charm was an awesome draw. That Charm was a very, very good, important draw. We should just conquer Sanctum with our Poro, right? 3, 6, 9. I would be very interested in playing Master Yi. We don't have to play around Cleave. I mean, we kind of would have to play around. So he's conquering here first, just to make sure that we get a spell out. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is actually better. Sending the Poro to Voidgate. This is much better. And now we can Yi. Yeah, Marsha's sequencing there was better. It's much better to send the Poro at the student first, so that you know the coast is clear. Yep. And then we should probably be interested in charming. Yep. I agree. Excellent. Very well done. And then I think we should just hide under Candlelit Sanctum as well, right? Just to keep our Yi protected. Yep. And then we get to sit on guard. This ended up being a very good sequence for us. Ended up being a very, very good sequence. Very well played. Very well played by Marsh. The timing of getting the Singularity out of our opponent's hand and then getting Yi is going to work out very well for us, because I think the way it would have worked if we had gone with my line, I want to pause there for a minute and kind of backtrack that, because I think it's pretty interesting. If we had gone with my line of not using the Primal Wraith or the other spell and tapping out for Yi the turn prior, our opponent very well might, because Singularity can target any unit, right? It's not beholden to units on battlefield. So they very well might have attacked first to proc Zonias. Or we maybe wouldn't have even had Zonias in play. Yeah, we would have had Zonias in play. But we wouldn't have been able to protect Yi, right? I think the Yi would have always died to Singularity in that spot. So that ended up being a really, really heads-up play by Dr. Marsh here. Now we've got Darius into Hopeful. Proc 7. Doesn't want to proc Hourglass, so he's just taking the free point at Voidgate over the Poro. I think that makes a lot of sense. Oh, he just doesn't have another trick, right? So he just wouldn't be able to deal the 8 to the E. That also makes sense. And now we're getting a trade, potentially. Very nice. The Yi Legend ability coming in massive here. Confirm that card real quick. That is a card I think is more commonly a sideboard card, no? Oh, Mystic Reversal. Okay. Okay. Don't tempt me with a time warp. Don't tempt me with a good time, baby. So we get our hold points. Retreating. Claiming the second point. Very smart. And we're just chilling. I think this line makes a lot of sense. Not that we had a ton of options here, obviously. Just 2 cards in hand, but... yeah, Mystic Reversal, very, very good draw here. Not completely relevant, the fact that we can just play 2 very powerful spells if need be. Obviously, Primal Might is an action, not a reaction, but... I mean, anything barring, like, a Falling Star or something, I assume... I mean, even in the Falling Star scenario, we still have Arzonia, so I think we have a lot of our bases covered here. I think this was really well sequenced. Also, we were able to keep Kaisa from accumulating a lot of cards, which is really valuable. So they're not ahead on that front. Another Darius, readying it. That's still, they're representing 11 into R8, so I could still see it being a little scary for them. We should commit the Primal Might here, I believe. There's no reason not to. It's kind of hard-pressed to even imagine what they could have, right? Because even like Cleave wouldn't have been enough there. And then we're very likely to just win by holding and flipping, right? Holding and then ganking Candle it. Yup. Looks like they're calling it. Very nice. Oh, wait. Yep. So wait, why did... Oh... Because it's for the turn. That's insane. So... That's insane. So I wonder why... Wait, I wonder why closing time didn't... So he showed that the last card in his hand was Falling Star, but because the Yi healed, so it was 15, the Falling Star doesn't take it out, but we could have Falling Starred it first. So the logic to not do that was you just thought that it was more likely that the card was like an unguard or something. But even then, that doesn't make sense, right? Because Voidgate does the extra damage. Let me read Voidgate real quick. How does Voidgate interact with spells that target twice? Each instance is increased by 1. So, Falling Star would have done 8 damage, which means you play around on guard there as well. That's very interesting. I wonder what closing time was playing around there instead then. Because if they had used the Void Gate, we would have not been able to use Wrath, right? With it just being in action. Very interesting conclusion to that game. Very interesting. All right, so Dr. Marsh takes the first game. Closing time presumably going to be on the play again. See if I can help move this along a little bit. All right. Here we go. Got the shuffling going. Now we have Dreaming Tree versus Targons. Very, very interesting dynamic that this version of Yi is playing enough spells in the mid-range version that we can actually benefit from Dreaming Tree here more than what we would expect a Kaisa deck to be able to benefit from, which I think does make sense. Easy put back on the Colossus. I would be kind of tempted to put Charm back too, since we don't have a lot of ways to make good use of it early. But Doctor's going to opt to keep it. Which one is that one? Yeah, the Keeper. I'm glad the Keeper is starting to see a little more play. I think that card is pretty underrated. I think the ability to have your 2-drop draw you a card in the late game is very valuable. We went second, so we opted for a Find Your Center line. I think that makes a lot of sense. No real reason to commit to the board when we're already going to be behind on it anyways. Might as well maximize our resource count and just flood the board later on. I agree. And we just immediately go for a Kaisa plus untap line. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, they're going to get their card off Dreaming Tree, presumably. A little surprised that we wanted to sit on all of our defense here. I wonder if this is this like a bluff angle? Was he trying to like bluff? I don't think bluffing Primal Might or... I wonder why we didn't want the Pit Rookie in play. We just wanted to play around Falling Star, but... I mean, it's kind of not clear to me that you can ever play around Falling Star. I'm not sure I love that. Like, I kind of feel like if you wanted to play around Falling Star, you just play the Keeper and the Rookie. Because it's always going to 2-for-1 you, right? I feel like it's always going to 2-for-1 you. We're stupefying the Kaisa to draw 2 cards. It's a very good play by closing time. Hopeful is our second spell. Yeah, and see, now we're just behind. Like, we've just had a lot of resources that we didn't spend. I don't know that I love that. I kind of feel like you just have to play through the Falling Stars, unfortunately. Because now we're just so far behind. It's not even a guarantee that they have it every time, right? And it's like, even when they do have it, like I said, I feel like you just have to play through that stage of the game. I don't think not playing your units is the right way to combat that. Opponent has a ton of resources up. What are we doing with this charm? We're sending the charm into our Poro. Because it's the defender, so our Poro is a 5? If I'm reading this board right. Really interesting line. Really interesting line. Opponent has 3 resources up. It's very scary to do this, I think. Even with Defy in hand. Yeah. Is it actually going to work? I didn't think so. All right, so it's still a trade, though. Yeah, that actually worked out really well. I would have been really afraid of that, but... Really, really good line by Dr. Marsh again. Very impressed with a lot of the sequencing. I still suspect I would have wanted to play one of our 2-drops the turn before and open ourselves up to a Falling Star, because I just think Falling Star is always going to be insane against us, quite truthfully. But a lot of those combat sequences looked really good to me. I didn't expect the Charm Kaisa to look as good as it did. I would have also been really incentivized to not rush that play, because they weren't threatening any card advantage from the Kaisa anyways. They were only threatening a hold point, which I don't think is that scary. And you might be able to catch them on a turn where they spend more resources and are representing less cards. But that may not even be true, especially when you're fighting over Targons, right? It's entirely possible they're just going to have multiple resources up the entire game. Closing time here in the tank. Yep, just going to go for an easy 4th point, presumably an easy 5th point on Targon's peak, unless they're considering maybe putting trying to accelerate a different unit in. Five points, now our Find Your Center is turned on, which is nice. There's the Falling Star. And see, this is kind of what I was talking about. Even if that Falling Star was in our opponent's hand the entire game, they were always going to get to use it on us. I feel like... so I want to pause there just to kind of make a theoretical point. So this is kind of what I would say is a strength of mine. from just the raw number of years I've played Magic competitively. A lot of times, just because you can make a play worse for your opponent in the short term doesn't actually mean it gives you a long-term benefit. So in this scenario here, we on turn 2, right, because our first turn was Find Your Center. So on turn 2, we had access to 6 resources, and we only played 1 2-cost unit, and we had 2 other 2-cost units in our hand that we did not play, and we weren't representing any spells, right? We also had an Hourglass there for what it was worth, though I understand not wanting to play the Hourglass. And I don't know this for sure, but I suspect Dr. Marsh's logic was, if I just play all of my units out, then he gets the early double conquer, and a Falling Star is just too powerful on that board, right? Because it would have destroyed 2 units early, etc. But here's the thing. The opponent that next turn ended up, I think, just playing Kaisa or playing Unit plus Hopeful or something. They had a really good turn that they were able to do because they weren't forced to spend 2 resources on Falling Star, right? So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, if we had just played into the Falling Star earlier, like I kind of suspect we should have, you were always going to get 2 for 1 like we did, right? It always gets the 2 units. But it at least denied closing time the ability to add the 6 to 8 might onto the board that they did initially as well, right? So there's just a lot of built-in advantage when you use your resources as often as you can. Basically, in that scenario, we would have spent 4 resources that we weren't forced to spend at various other stages of this game. And maybe now our opponent would have a much harder time deploying their threats because their earlier turns were spent using removal on our units, right? How the entire game would have played out differently, a little unclear, of course, because that would have changed a lot of the different trajectories. But just kind of a broad theory point in general. We spent our first turn, Find Your Centering for extra resources, and then we didn't even end up using them. And we just gave our opponent a lot of leeway on how to manage the game. So it looks like we are playing a Darius as our second spell here. And we are going to use... And we are going to reinforce on Peak, which I think makes a decent bit of sense. We are a turn away from being able to Predator, of course. And we do not have a good combat. So we're just going to go in and try and threaten a trade on Student. I think that makes a decent bit of sense. Get it while the getting's good. They probably don't want to commit a spell there anyways. And then we're just obliged to Yi here because we don't have any other line that we could do. It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, you've got to go Dreaming Tree. Yep. Game over. I agree. Made the only play you had, but was never going to work in that spot. I mean, Kaisa just had way too much tempo. 5 victory points. Huge lead on the board. Wild. Pretty straightforward game, though. Like I said, I'm not even sure playing the extra 2-cost units would have won us the game or anything like that. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. I'm more or less just trying to make sure people understand how valuable trading and spending your resources early game can be against a card like Falling Star that doesn't actually have as much counterplay as you would think. Alright, we've got God-Willow versus Reaver's Row. Presumably we're going to be on the play. I would think we want the opportunity to go first here. We've been second twice now. Maybe be the first one to get a unit on the board, initiate some early tempo. Reaver's Row is for sure one of Kaisa's best battlefields. I think the more people are gaming with that, the more they're kind of understanding that. But it still is very beneficial if you're first on the board because it lets you keep a lot of your unit dexterity. All right, let's see if we can speed this up a little bit again. Here we go. I would be very interested in keeping at least, I mean, the Poro and the Spirit. I don't think you can ever have Unyielding Spirit in your deck against Kaisa and throw it back. I think the Poro's great here. The Charm is interesting. The Charm is just so much better as an early game option in Master Yi than it is for any other archetype. He just keeps everything. I really like that, actually. I really like keeping everything. I think there's a world where you could get rid of the primal strength, but I think I like keeping everything. Interesting. I mean, we're never using Charm here. Very interesting turn. I mean, I think it's a pretty easy... I think you just send Poro in to God-Willow. Yeah, I think threatening a hold here is really good. So, like, we don't have the most... We don't have the most slam dunk ways to protect our Poro on God-Willow here. But our opponent is only going up to 5 resources, and if we can force them to play spells instead of developing their board with something like a Kaisa that they would want to do to keep us from getting this hold value, I think that's really valuable. Alternatively, we're kind of denying the Kaisa line because Kaisa does not line up against our Yi ability plus Poro here, correct? Doesn't seem like it. We would be... Yeah, especially with Discipline, we would outclass that combat. So we have a lot of agents here. I really like sending Poro into God-Willow here. I think that puts a lot of pressure on our opponent. I also, notably, I really like not playing the Hourglass. I really like not playing the Hourglass. Because we don't ultimately care about retreating the Poro that much. I think saving that for a bigger unit like our Master Yi or something makes a lot of sense. Yeah. See, and this is exactly why. Now we have a lot of agency here. Yep. And we still can use our Discipline, which I think is very valuable. It's the reason that this line was so good, I think. I think it's really easy. So I want to set up a pause there because I was just talking about how, and I spent a lot of the video so far harping on spending your mana, right? Spend your mana, play your units when you have them, etc. I want to point out that a lot of that feeling is towards the fact that what counterplay are you giving your opponent, right? So in the scenario before where I wanted you to be spending your resources on your units so you could develop your board, the opportunity cost of that can actually be quite high, right? Because your opponent is forced to react to what you're doing or to use their removal proactively and not advance their board themselves. In this scenario, because we were threatening so much value on holding the God-Willow, which is not something that you want to give your opponent ever if you can help it, while it may look like we're just letting our mana go to waste instead of committing to an Hourglass that will eventually win and play anyways, I think it's so likely that our opponent is going to fight over God-Willow that we are actually getting to spend our mana and our opponent doesn't have a lot of counterplay. Like, sure, our opponent could say, oh, well, you might have a lot of tricks up. I'm just going to develop my board, right? Maybe I'm going to play the Kaisa. Maybe I'm going to play a Darius. Just a big unit, maybe 2 units, maybe a Yorl plus a Hopeful, that kind of thing. And take advantage of the fact that we didn't spend our resources, right? That we sat on full combat interaction. But that play is so much more likely on different battlefields. The fact that this game was started with God-Willow implies that there's going to be a lot more action happening in a situation like that. And I think that makes this line much, much better. And honestly, much safer. Because it's not really wasting your resources. You know for a fact that your opponent's going to fight over God-Willow. Really good foresight. And they don't presumably have any combat tricks of their own, so it does not make sense for them to send Sentry in. They're just going to take the student and pass, and we get to draw. Did we not draw our second card? Yep, he's doing it now. Yep, we draw for God-Willow, and now I would say that I like our spot quite a bit. Big fan of our spots. Opponent has spent all of their resources. I would have some modicum of interest in charming the student here, because we're already going to be a 6 versus the Kaisa, no? So yeah, I really like this charm. I think this charm is very good. And then we just sit on Discipline again. Make our opponent do something. We're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we even have a good line against Unit plus Darius. I really like the way that Dr. Marsh has played this game. I am a big fan. I think every decision that he's made is something that I would be wanting to emulate. Closing time in the tank. Trying to think of what their options even could be here. I mean, presumably they don't have anything like just a Hextech Ray, because you would just use that already. I think that would be pretty straightforward. You would at least know what you're dealing with. Opponent must be in a very hard spot. I would definitely say we're probably the odds-on favorite to get more God-Willow value. This Sentry is looking like it's going to have some pretty easy holds. I don't know how much we're going to be trying to threaten it at Reaver's Row. I mean, our pit rookie's not doing anything, so we're just going right for the Stupefy. All right, yeah, I think that's fine. That bumps us down to a 1, or a 2, rather. And then, so it was Darius. So this is going to trump us, right? Because it's 7 into our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I counted all the correct buffs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, it's actually going to be 7 versus 7. Because we're shield and buff, so we're 4. 5, 6 from Yi, but we've been reduced from Stupefy, so 5, and then Discipline is 7. Yeah, but even then, this is a very good exchange for us, I think. And they're just retreating. I feel like you don't have to retreat there, right? Yeah, I feel like, I think... I wonder if I'm misunderstanding an interaction there. Isn't... I guess it's ultimately... so my logic would be you don't have to retreat the Sentry because you can just bring it back off Reaver's Row if we were to attack Reaver's Row. But I guess the logic is you don't need to threaten the free hold, because even if we go God-Willow and we would hold the Sentry at 3, we can just presumably send the Sentry at 3 on our turn, so it's the same thing functionally. Okay, I guess so. This just gives us a little more agency if for some reason we didn't attack Reaver's Row and they want to be able to send an extra unit at God-Willow. It's a really minor advantage, but it is an advantage, so it's something to have learned. And we are very unit light this game. This is definitely one of the ways that closing time could get back into the game, because we actually had a lot of the early tempo in our favor. We've drawn a lot of spells and interaction that we haven't been quite able to capitalize with. Now, one good thing I will say is our interaction should allow us to keep holding God-Willow. So we're not really pushing ahead on victory points, but we should continue pushing ahead on cards. Falling Star. Yeah, I mean, this is not really something you want to reversal, but it's kind of not clear if we have anything else that even looks good here. Yeah, you just gotta let it happen. Good sequencing by closing time that they didn't like play their Kaisa first or something, because that could have been a catastrophe. If they had played their Kaisa and like tried to conquer Reaver's Row and then Falling Star afterwards, our reversal would have been so good there. But of course we have no counterplay to the Falling Star, unfortunately. And yeah, this is... I see how closing time got back in. This is pretty horrible for us, unfortunately. We do get to do Master Yi this turn. They get to draw a card off Sentry. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not charm there. It's a little too enticing. Yeah. I mean, this turn I think was very straightforward. Makes a lot of sense. Got to get their card advantage engine offline. I mean, sitting on Defier on guard would be nice, but there's no way doing one of those is more valuable than getting the Kaisa off the board. Because even if they didn't have a way to combat Yi plus Hourglass, they would just go Reaver's Row, get the free card draw, and we are definitely setting up for like a long, grindy game. So, Dr. Marsh absolutely making the right line there. Really, if we do end up losing this game, which I presume we will, considering, like I said, the outcome of the tournament overall, really the only thing that bit us was having just not enough mid-game units. If we had gotten to play any number of reasonably sized units in that mid-game there, we would have been really far ahead on tempo. Presumably the card we're like living in fear of right now is like, I guess Watcher would be annoying, but not really any different. I mean, I think we assume our Hourglass is... Yeah, there's the Watcher. I was going to say, I think we assume our Hourglass is getting procced regardless. So we are not accelerating, which means... Oh, interesting. Very interesting. I wonder... We didn't need to do that to get it, right? It was already only a 6 might. So I don't think we needed to do that, because it doesn't... Our Yi wouldn't have procced or anything. Alright. Sona, nice little mid-game draw potentially. This is definitely the turn that we needed to draw a mid-game threat. The Sona's a very good draw there, because pretty much every turn after this turn for the rest of the game, our opponent's going to be able to threaten Time Warp. God, it's such a shame. If we had just been able to play any units in the mid-game, this reversal on Falling Star would have been so unreal. Oh my god, it's just the third Falling Star too. Yeah, there's not a lot of counterplay to that. Yeah, and we're just super dead. They just send Watcher to Reaver's Row. And probably get the double hold. And Vi. Yep. Yeah, that's just going to do it. I don't even know if we have any outs. Oh. That was our best draw by a lot, but I think we're still dead, right? Yep. Gotta go God-Willow because we want to deny the card draw, and we wouldn't be able to take the Watcher out anyways. 3. Well, see, but this is where the problem is because now they still get their 8th point. They get the hold point on Watcher, and then the Vi just beats the Predator. So that's gonna do it. That is gonna be the ball game. Make a gigantic Vi and crunch. All right. So, interesting points of note. I think Dr. Marsh played this match really well. I don't know if this match... I think, from my understanding, this matchup is already pretty Kai'Sa favored. The Yi mid-range deck is basically going to be, on average, a little bit weaker to Kai'Sa, but better against kind of the other, like, more yellow-themed or gear destruction colors. Whereas Aurora, I think, specifically lines up better against Kai'Sa, but obviously Kai'Sa's not dead in the water there either. Kai'Sa's, Kai'Sa is Kai'Sa for a reason, right? She's not particularly weak to anything. There's been some speculation that as it adopts heavier unit-sized builds, that maybe Annie is something that can take over a little bit in that matchup, but for the most part, Kai'Sa is the boogeyman for a reason. And we got to see why here. I think Dr. Marsh played this match awesome. I think we got to learn a lot, talk through a lot of scenarios, just kind of like on a broad, theoretical sense. But we also just got to highlight why Kai'Sa is the number one enemy right now, right? I mean, Falling Stars, Void Seekers, all of these cheap interaction plus the resource gain that you get to accumulate from your legend ability. There's just so much going on, so much power built in to any other matchup where somebody's trying to do something fair, right? And I think that's kind of where the line in the sand is being drawn, because this build of Master Yi, even with a little bit of ramp and big units, is ultimately just doing a fair thing, right? So, very interesting match. Very interesting set of games, in my opinion. Marsh even took one of the games off from the eventual champion of this tournament. And, yeah, I think Closing Time's play was really good as well. You get to kind of see why they went on to win this tournament. I think their sideboarding options made a lot of sense. I don't think Vi in the Kai'Sa sideboard has been a very popular thing. I think, generally speaking, it's been more on the end of, like, the larger units, like Mundo, for example, to combat these ramp decks. But if you know that the game is going to go long and you're going to trade a lot of spells and interaction, the Vi ends up making a lot of sense, right? Because it kind of serves as the same function as what a Mundo would serve, but on that big turn, it's much cheaper, right? And it also probably doesn't have it doesn't have a lot of the same weaknesses of you can commit it to the board early so it doesn't just rot in your hand also, but serves a very similar late game function where you can just win a combat against a large unit. I think that's a lot. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's a very smart build adaptation that I haven't seen a lot of other people kind of approach. And as the set releases, obviously, we're going to be looking for a lot of that innovation and changes that people make to the stock list, right? A lot of times that innovation kind of breeds success, and it's really nice coming from other games to get to see innovation get rewarded. I think that's an excellent spot for the game to be, especially as it's waiting its release on the West. All right, guys, I think that set is going to do it for us today. Ended up being a little bit longer than usual. We had a nice, full, long 3-game set, so we're closing in just around the 50-minute mark here. If you guys liked what you saw, go ahead and throw me out a like, a comment, and a subscribe. It does help the channel quite a bit, and we will keep these going. I think it's been really cool to see a lot of different archetypes, different play styles, learn all the cards, learn all of the sequences this way. Like I said, this helps me. This is the way that I've been learning. I have since been playing on TCG Arena, so I finally have a feel for getting a lot of the cards played myself. But yeah, even doing that, I'm gonna keep this format for the videos going forward. I think it's incredibly beneficial for me and hopefully for you guys as well. So until next time, guys, that's gonna do it. Peace.